Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. We are so happy you've joined us to the series where we are once again delighted to bring you insightful, thought-provoking presentations across a broad spectrum of OTT-related topics from thought leaders across our industry. With the continually growing array of streaming TV options at viewers' fingertips, viewer churn and ad fatigue have quickly become some of the biggest challenges facing the industry today. But another industry issue, unsold ad inventory, might actually be the solution. To help us understand this intriguing and yet somewhat audacious sounding assertion, we are very pleased to welcome to the OTT.X stage Fred Godfrey, the CEO and co-founder of Origin, a pioneering media technology company reshaping how brands engage and activate consumers on the largest screen at home, that being your TV. An innovator and ad tech and connected TV, Fred has spent the last 15 years building companies like Origin that break the mold and disrupt the status quo to address key challenges and gaps in the industry. Welcome, Fred. We're glad you're here.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here with all of you guys. I love you lot.
All right, so I believe you have some slides to share with us. We'll get things going. I love that you're wearing a flannel shirt. I want to comment on that because myself being from Seattle, we wear those not out of fashion, it's out of necessity because it's drippy and cold here, of course, much like England, I think so.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's one of the rules. You know, we've been 2.5 years living in Seattle and I had to burn my wardrobe when we arrived and then build up a new wardrobe. And I brought it east to New York and it works on these chilly days. So for anyone else who's here in New York, I hope you're staying nice and warm. But thank you firstly to OTT.X for having me on. We're extremely pleased to be members, with you, and we love the opportunity for a number of reasons, mainly because, a lot of what's within the DNA of Origin is our desire not just to sell great products and services, but also to really help educate and facilitate this industry as it really does hit its stride. And so what I'm hopefully going to share with you today, if I'm able to do this right, is, hold on, this should hopefully work. There we go. What I'm going to try and share with you today, if you can all see that, is going to be really excellent. As much sort of thought leadership as it is ways to solve problems. And I'll walk you through what I mean by that in a minute. I'll make sure that we have a little pause in the middle for any questions or if anyone's dogs need to go out for a quick break. But this is what we're here to talk about today. Attention in the age of distraction, and how we can leverage creativity to minimize churn, but also maximize attention, because when we maximize attention, we're able to get more money. And in an industry where things are becoming very expensive, that is definitely something that people are looking for. So let's start with who I am. I'm Fred. I'm the CEO of a pioneering media and technology company called Origin. And I'll explain what we do in a second, but putting aside what Origin does, I'm here because, as I mentioned, I have a very personal, very sincere passion for surfacing topics that are vital to everybody that I hope is here, but topics that aren't necessarily being discussed or addressed today. The best way to really describe that is when I'm talking to folks or up on a panel, one of the best sort of illustrations I try to give to this is, while everybody's looking left at solving problems that you'll all be very familiar with that are really behind the glass, whether it's programmatic solutions, platforms, streaming services, solutions, play out providers, data and targeting, measurement, and all that good stuff. We look right. We have spent the last 3 years focusing on actually what happens in front of the glass, because we believe that without thinking about what's in front of the glass, what the viewer actually sees at home, a lot of what happens behind it, it can be redundant. And I think that this is where we're going to see the tipping point this year, where creative is going to start to take a spotlight. And we just happen to be very fortunate insofar as we've been really focusing on that world for the last 3 years. So before I dive into, what we feel and think, obviously I just want to level set out the gate because as I know OTT.X feels about very passionately, we are still in a world where the acronyms are a little bit mixed up. So I just want to be very, very clear with everybody that for the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about one screen and one screen only, as Eric mentioned, the TV, the living room experience. We're actually, over the course of this year, probably going to stop calling it connected TV and actually specifically just call it TV. We actually did a survey of the nation mid last year, and we held a webinar saying, has the time come to take out of CTV? It wasn't quite ready then, but it is going to be ready now, or at least over the course of this year. And this is the only screen that we focus on at Origin because it is a screen that has a unique set of problems, as well as being the most expensive and as well as having the most potential. And another sort of illustration that I want to share is really why CTV has to be broken out as a subset of the rest of OTT, because this really sort of helps illustrate and surface where a lot of its challenges exist. It's a very lean back place. It's not clickable. We don't count remote controls as being clickable because people don't really do it in an ad experience, and we are fundamentally focused on advertising. It's non-skippable. And it really only offers indirect attribution today for brands and agencies, which are the people that make us all of our money. It's also got the potential for dual screen activation, which I think is important, not just for brands, but for those of you here. And most importantly is it's an incredibly immersive co-viewing environment. We are all humans here, right? And I know that in the industry, it's easy for us to log off at the end of the day, go and sit down, get a gin and tonic, and turn on the TV, but and forget that we're actually consumers. But we know what it's like to be there watching telly. And as one of the rules that we have at Origin sort of really does state, we always try to remember that we're consumers too. So again, this is where we're going to be focusing today. This is where we focus everything about what we do. So what does Origin do? Just to help frame the discussion, and the goal here will not be to sell anything, but to hopefully create some sparks and thoughts and imagination. We devise creative solutions that sell attention. And as the need for performance advertising grows, our primary job is to help brands elevate awareness, impact, and outcome of their investments on TV. So that's great for any brands or agencies here, which I don't think there are too many of today. But also as viewership grows, we help media owners, content owners, channels, and platforms solve similar problems, right? So discovery, churn, making money, which is what a few of us are here for today. And the reason why we are so singularly focused is because this really does illustrate the single biggest problem that we have really sleepwalked into when it comes to connected TV or digital TV, however you want to describe it, the big TV at home, is that while consumers have evolved massively over the last 10 years, TV has evolved to being digital rather than traditional, but the TV experience hasn't. We have carried, and I'll repeat this a few times, we've kind of been looking forward by carrying habits from the past. And that doesn't work in a world where the people that we're trying to sell attention to have changed. If you look at, the average millennial, let's just say, which is a big portion of all TV viewership, to get their attention, you have to create a value exchange. And for most of you, that's about providing really good content in a really easy experience, and ideally make money out of them at the same time. But the format and the way that we've been going about this hasn't yet entirely aligned with what they actually really will keep their attention. And that is because we've not really been looking as an industry closely enough at what the technology that underpins streaming can do as it pertains to what can happen in front of the glass. And so that's really, again, that's what we focus on, and that's what I want to try and surface and illustrate with you guys today to see how that resonates with you. Oh, you going? Yeah, no, oh, she's thinking about it. There we go. and how we can therefore help in this world that is becoming increasingly challenging. So this first bit is the thing which I think we've really squared off, right? We live in a world of increasingly constant distraction where the rarest commodity we all have is attention. And we were very fortunate that over the last 6 months, we were heavily immersed in a media lab with IPG, where we actually applied neuroscience to understanding what that really means. And what does it mean, not just for advertisers, but for media owners too, when it comes to the fact that attention is a rare commodity. And this is what we established, is that people aren't really as engaged as they should be in a sort of a flat capacity. They come and go. And in fact, the best illustration for that, if anybody's come across one of these solutions called T-Vision, they actually apply eye tracking to thousands of homes across America, and they look at the entire content and ad experience, the whole linear or AVOD experience. Just what are people actually doing? Where are they looking, when and why? And what we established is that attention is a roller coaster. You can have people really immersed, and then when they think they're going to go into, let's say, an ad break, they drop off, and then maybe they come and go during the ad break, then they are still gone, they come back. And this is the problem when it comes to like how that impacts the other challenges that we understand from our partners that suppliers or publishers face. And, you know, and it's really, this issue of attention exacerbates the three things which we've listed here, which we've really isolated as being the three biggest high-level problems that exist that I'll be happy to dive into. And that is that the delta between viewership and ad spend, which is where the money comes from, and apologies to anybody here who's exclusively subscription-based, but the delta is very, very wide. It is closing a bit, but it is still too wide. And that makes the cost of marketing your content more and more expensive every day. It makes the competition obviously increasingly hard, which is what makes it more expensive. And because the delta is growing, where you're getting more viewers, hopefully, but the ad spend isn't necessarily matching that audience growth. I live on 79th, so this is a siren. I apologize. Your channels are going to cost more to run because it costs money to serve a channel, and it's very expensive when you're not being able to make money from everybody watching it. But also the third biggest problem is through talking to other partners and other OTT.X members, like our friends at Vizio, the cost of losing a viewer through churn is extremely high. And so you've invested in bringing people to you, and your content will absolutely keep them, but then how do you keep them all the time? And how do you make sure they return to you without it costing you your shirt? And this is one of the biggest challenges that we hear all the time. And there are really, really good solutions out there like Universal Search and others that help really surface the search and discovery piece, but organic retention is difficult. And I'm not here to talk about other things that I know people have talked about on previous Wednesday webinars, like exclusivity of content is vital, quality of content is vital. Like, you know, all of that stuff. Like that's obvious. And yes, it's difficult and it's expensive, but they're not the only things that can help as you seek to tap this gold seam that is now, you know, well, is now the prevailing form of TV viewership in the living room, but is also one of the most democratized that there is, but is also one of the most challenging, because there are a lot of gatekeepers here that I'm sure you're aware of. And there are a lot of different actors wanting to take a different piece of the pie. And so what we intend to do is just help in a little small capacity, mitigate against a few of the things that can, you know, that may be causing you not to make the money and keep the viewership that you want, all of which is being exacerbated by one big problem. And that is that the ad break experience absolutely sucks. And that might sound weird from someone whose company's entire revenue comes from making money inside the ad break. I do appreciate that. But to be clear, and as you'll probably sort of feel by now, we don't believe in just sort of, oh, look, this is an existing thing, let's just make another version of something we can do here. we actually believe that the entire ecosystem really needs to be thought through again, but looking at the other side of the glass. And the reason we say that is because I mentioned it earlier, the industry's adopted a 70-year-old playbook, right? And it's not our fault. It's nobody's fault here that that's been adopted. That if you are an ad-supported channel, or app out there on connected TV, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault that we've taken this approach of here's my show every X minutes. I'm going to put in a 2-minute ad break, etc. Like it's because we just haven't thought about it differently yet. And that's a challenge because of everything we're saying about consumers. The ability to produce and run promos is highly limited. The ways Eric mentioned that will be where I really get to illustrate things, the way we currently fill any unsold air in linear digital programming. So not necessarily an AVOD where you may have the technology to compress your ad breaks if you don't fill the entire pod, but in linear where you can't, is the way we currently fill that air can be counterproductive because that is where most of the churn can happen. And this is where we look to create tiny little incremental changes or to help folks make small incremental changes that can really actually move the dial. So to that end, and speaking of breaks, I'd love to just hit pause here for a second and see if anybody has any questions. What have I said that is crazy or totally non-understandable or otherwise?
Yeah, so for those of you who have questions or want to make some comments, please do drop them into the Q&A bin. That's the best place for us to find them. You can put them in the chat as well, but one of those two places would be great to hear from you about some of the problems, and I'm really interested in hearing the solutions to these problems. It's funny, something you were mentioning, Fred, when you think about churn, and I was just thinking about this, we typically think about churn as a subscriber that stops subscribing. But when it comes to a television show, like if you leave and don't come back, you've kind of churned out of the television show, right? Or if you leave during the midst of it and then don't watch the ads or something, or you're on your phone, you sort of churned out of the experience. And I don't know, have we thought of it this way? And it's fascinating that we actually have the ability to sort of track this to some extent. That's really useful.
Yeah, well, I'm really pleased you raised that because you're right. It's very easy to synonymize certain words with certain environments. And, when we talk about churn, we absolutely don't just mean churning of subscriptions. We mean the idea that somebody might churn because let's say you're surfing through a linear guide, right? Like Pluto TV, TV Plus, Zumo, or one of the many linear aggregators out there that perhaps one of you has a channel on. Right? The great thing about digital linear and what Pluto really brought to the foreground was mimicking this olden days experience that makes us all feel cozy and solving the fact that I bet you there's not a single person here that when they do turn on a subscription-based service, they probably spend more time looking for something to watch than they do watching it. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you can just flick through and have a look at things is every channel owner's dream. And that they're refreshing that wheel of content enough that it means that should someone go away and come back consistently every day, they'll see something new on your channel. But if someone's surfing, and we'll get to this when we talk about the dead air, if someone's surfing through the channels and they just get this, we'll be right back, you're not going to stick around just because you're telling them you'll be right back. They're going to go. Mm-hmm. And that is where loyalty ends and looking for instant gratification begins. And so we mean churn insofar as simply surfing and flicking straight past your channel. And we also mean churn as in they're watching your movie, they're loving it, but they then go into an ad break. And whether it's you filling your own ad pods or other people helping you fill those ad pods, if you only get halfway through filling it and let's say you have managed to chuck in a promo or a tune-in, and then you got to go to Slate, how likely are they to stick around? The answer is you can't guarantee it. And, and the numbers are coming in to sort of prove that that's the case. And the sad thing right, for a channel owner is that, a lot of people, a lot of different channel owners have different rules as to when they will start advertising. You want to get them sucked in. You may serve like 10 or 12 minutes before you go to the first break. Well, that's a big investment. If you then lose them in that first break, you've just paid for all of that entertainment and you're not going to get your money back. And also they may remember that and they may not come back. So we really do mean churn as in anybody that leaves. And we believe that the responsibility for that really falls into a number of buckets. And again, to really emphasize what I think most people here will feel applies to them, the content experience itself is number one. Absolutely is front and center number one. Your library is what will separate you from the pack. What we do is just help point out and fill a couple of the really small gaps that do also exist that wouldn't hurt to fix.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a really important thing to think about with so much of our business going the ad-supported way. It's what, it's what we talk about. But we don't really talk about are people watching the ads, and what can you do to make sure that they do. And it seemingly now we even have the ability to track whether or not they are. And I'm certainly not. Like, I watch just about everything with my laptop or my phone or both, like you had in your picture. And I'm certainly not unique in that respect. I mean, the ads to me often seem like an opportunity to work. I'm like, God, this is a really great show, but I've got to get a couple of emails out. I hope there's an ads.
Exactly. And so like, I'm very much today not going to be talking about it, but our Origin's core product, like where we learned the problem of attention wasn't actually through the lens of solving problems for most of the folks here today. It was actually solving precisely that problem for advertisers. Yeah. Anybody who goes to the homepage of Origin, and remember, we make 100% of our money by supporting brands and agencies on TV. The top of the homepage is, what's the point in advertising if no one's watching? Exactly. Right? Like, this is where we may be a fairly young, fairly nascent company, but we've been, some people might say stupid enough, others might say sort of dangerous enough to address that kind of 900-pound gorilla. And 2 years ago, it didn't matter, but now it does, because brands seek performance. And what we've done is we've been, right. And otherwise, why?
Yeah. I mean, and there's more and more ad-supported content. Subscription is still, a very large component. But last week we had a stat that 50% of what is watched on OTT or on television will be ad-supported.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge change.
Yes, and it's going to continue to grow. And I do have other more sort of subjective thoughts and opinions about that as to how this landscape may shapeshift over time. I think that I was talking to somebody at a publication about this last week, and I know we're going on a segue here, but I do believe, and this is helpful maybe for people, that the next 2 to 3 years at least is going to see like an annual roller coaster of the darling being subscriptions and then the darling being advertising, the darling being subscriptions, the darling being advertising. And it will, I think, eventually kind of like net out. And, and there will be this kind of, everybody will have their loyalty. And I think that's going to then raise additional problems for media owners, which is how much do I want to flog the idea of my own app being up there versus having a linear channel? I would love to know how many people on this call like really do support both an app where people can watch content on demand and a linear channel that they carry through people like Pluto and Zumo and TV Plus, etc., and whether they think that they're getting any more luck with one versus the other. Because the way that we're seeing the landscape move when we talk to our advertisers, again, this is all about advertising, is that they really do want to, and we try to educate them out of this, but they do typically want to be seen in certain places. And that makes being a bit of a wild card out there challenging. Now, there are people who have actually proven that they can be a little bit niche and a bit bespoke and be very, very successful. I think our good friend Gary and the folks at Watch Free Flicks, they know that only too well. They can sit on the fringe of like mainstream and have an incredibly, if not more loyal audience actually than a lot of the biggest players out there. But I think it's really important that people understand that people like that, I think, are more the exception than the rule. And I think that causes other thoughts and concerns as people go about planning their connected TV aspirations.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've heard is that folks are using the linear platforms like Pluto, the ones you mentioned, as almost promotion for their own subscription, for their own offerings, and that's that's kind of working. It's a way to attract people. You put a few episodes out there, and then find your audience, and it's not going to be everybody, because you're going after a specific audience. But like my mixology channel, for example, right? I'm not looking for everyone, certainly, just drunkards like myself that like to mix cocktails, I guess. So but there's plenty of them.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely talking to one right now. But you're right, and I think that will work to an extent. And again, like, I want to be careful how I say this, but maybe it's an interesting sort of thought or nugget, and that is that like, you're right. Launching your own channel is a great way of creating awareness for your own standalone app out there to be on Roku and Fire and Apple. But the problem is that you're beholden to that linear aggregator, as to, you're beholden to that linear aggregator and their desire to continue carrying you. And they'll only continue carrying you if you refresh that content enough. And if they see it as being in a certain percentile that's making them enough money. Because the days of we'll have 300, 400 channels on our linear guide, they're over. Like, now it's about quality for them over quantity. And that's in terms of what they're bringing into the ecosystem.
Yeah, increasingly that is going to be the case. I have an interesting question here from Michael Kedor, and I don't know that we're necessarily going to answer it, but could be a great topic for discussion in one of our an upcoming salon, OTT.X salon, or a roundtable discussion. And this question is, or his comment is, would love to hear more about folks' experiences with integrating linear and on-demand in the same environment. I think that is an interesting topic for discussion. Where is that going? What are people learning? And especially as many of our members are considering things like, there's certainly some expense with that, and you want to make sure that you optimize for the greatest value there for your business. Well, Fred, I'm going to let you get back to it here. I know you've got some more slides and some more stuff to get through, and helping us solve this problem that you've teed up so nicely. So why don't we? I'll take my leave, head backstage, and turn it back over to you. All right?
Okay. Perfect. So, like, hopefully you can still see this. I'm not very good with these things, but like, we've discussed the problems ad nauseum, and like, what we want to share is how getting creative can help solve problems. So while I've really not made any efforts to really describe what we do at Origin today, and I won't, the most important, or the most basic thing to point out is that take a company, slice it in half, and imagine that it's 50% animation studio and 50% ad tech, right? That's what we are. We are half studio and we're half technology, and we bring the two together, and we dive through all of the gritty wires of what sort of streaming can do, and we bring about these great solutions. And one of the things that we have been obsessed with for the last 2 years, as we have really dug our heels in, has been how advances in dynamic and agile creative capabilities can be our ticket to turning a moment that churns viewers into one that actually captivates them, right? And and so where I'm talking, and it can seem a bit weird and a bit out of place, but like, dynamic and agile creatives have never had a place on TV, and they still almost don't. And I will tell you that, like, having a discussion like this is as close to like real time with some of the most like progressive thinkers out there as I can imagine. It was only about 4 months ago that someone walked up to me after I'd just come off doing a panel somewhere in LA, and they said, "You're a very weird little man. What did you mean by like agile creativity on connected TV? That's not possible." And I said, "Well, actually, yes, it is. And this is all you have to do. You just have to be able to build that thing in real time and serve it out onto that TV in real time. It's not that complicated." And they go, "Well, that's very interesting. And can we talk again?" And that's lovely. And so like, this is what we want to try and show. My goal is really, as I said, to spark imagination, and not just to solve problems, but to create new opportunities. And I think that really, like, you know, this is what we were talking about before, is that if you've ever watched any kind of live linear TV, whether it's traditional or digital, we talked about this whole slate thing, you'll no doubt agree that a static screen telling you to stick around is not really invigorating, right? And so here's an example of what we're talking about, slate, right? For anybody that doesn't know what's like the word slate, it's the ad filler, it's the dead air, it's the "we'll be right back." It's the thing that sits below your channel, especially in digital linear, that is better than giving a viewer a black screen, right? And so typically today, it probably looks a little bit like this, maybe just not such a sad dog. And that's maybe because I chose the sad dog to evoke a certain kind of emotion in you to really make it feel like it's a terrible, terrible thing, because it really is a terrible thing. It costs a lot of money for you to run. It doesn't entice anybody to stay. And no matter how sad the dog is, you're probably going to look for a happier dog to stare at. And so when we started working with, we work hand in hand with a lot of media owners and supply partners. And just to, I guess, to put this out there, to make it clear, we represent a lot of agencies and a lot of brands who want us to elevate their clients' ads on TV. And for a lot of them, we actually handle the distribution of those campaigns as well. And so to do that, we manage our own portfolio of CTV partners who we then use for our distribution and reach for a campaign across the country. We're very lucky, like, you know, we represent people like Macy's and Toyota and some pharmaceutical folks and, you know, and other really interesting and challenging brands. We're just launching Visit Florida today. So like, if anybody out there has a big audience in Florida, let me know. We're also launching a Scottsdale campaign, domestic tourism, guys. This is it. So if anybody has big audiences in Scottsdale or Florida, hit me up. We've got money to give you. But, you know, more seriously, like we listen to those supply partners and we vet them. And that's how we understand that a lot of what we've done for advertisers had a really natural crossover to you guys as well. And that's what I wanted to show. And so I'm going to really try to make the next few slides not a pitch, but more as a way of illustrating what we really mean. So about 6 months ago, we released a product called Origin Slate. And it came about because a friend of ours who was an OEM said, "We are launching our own linear guide, and we have a lot of channels that we're going to be building ourselves, as well as like bringing in. And we know that we're not going to sell 100% of our spots, and we really don't like this 'We'll be right back. Could you build some content for us? Or could you give us some of your existing content? Because we've made hundreds and hundreds of hours of really fun content." And we sort of thought about the problem for a bit, and we established that, like, you never know how long that moment of dead air can be. It might be half a second. It could be a minute. It could be a minute and a half. It actually really can be. So we thought about that. And we thought about, like, the fact that we've spent 3 years learning how to bring attention back to the screen. As Eric and I were just describing, my living gets paid by knowing how to bring eyeballs back to the TV in an ad break when they're almost certainly somewhere else. And so we applied all of that and we said, okay, Slate actually runs for several billion minutes a month across the connected TV ecosystem. It's a big, big problem. And so we decided to solve it. And so we spent a year and a half developing and then launched with Cinedigm. I don't know if anyone from there is here today, but hello if you are. Origin Slate. And it's used by channel owners to replace the traditional Be Right Back with really interesting and dynamic native content that is infinite in length, that has been engineered to engage and entertain people while they wait for their show to return. And that's what I mean by this bringing a really simple level of dynamic and agile content into the environment. And so what we did in our studio is we don't create like a single custom slate theme or template. We created about half a dozen, maybe up to a dozen now. And we invite channel partners to go, I like the feel of this one. And, could I have this to run as my slate? And so you pick your channel, you pick your slate, and then you give us, you give us a bunch of details, you give us your logo, you give us any calls to action that you want. And this is where we get to kind of redefine promos and tune-ins, where you want to tell people that maybe you've just spent a lot of money buying some new content and you want them to know about it. So we get to use a lot of this real estate for you to tell them each week or each month something new that is going to be turning up at 9 o'clock tonight or whatever it is. And that's, again, what we mean by dynamic and agile. And so these are all designed to entertain people and to retain them regardless of how long the break is. I won't bore you with this, but it's incredibly easy and flexible and designed to be, agile. And it's no work from you apart from a couple of logos and some thoughts. But here's where it gets fun. For the first time ever, this slate also can actually generate you money. And this was the biggest thing that really bothered me, right? Is it's all very well keeping people there, but it's still going to cost you a CDN fee. So what about actually if we created patches of this slate that could go and get a sponsor? And our sales team then goes out and we talk to our agencies. We say, here is our menu of channel partners that are Origin slate partners. Here are the slates they're running. Would you like to sponsor any of these or some of these or all of these? And they pick and choose. And then we come to you and we say, we want to make sure it's not a conflict, but Cadillac would like to actually sponsor your slate. And then you hand over certain elements of control of that slate to the brand. So now it's a car that they're trying to work out in the clouds versus, a dolphin. And we then give a portion of the revenue, of that sponsorship revenue, directly to you. And the purpose, though, isn't to become a revenue driver. It is to be the cherry on top of retaining the viewer that is designed to cover the costs of managing and running that channel. Because Eric, that question that your friend in the audience asked is a really, really important one. It's delineating between having your standalone presence, which is very affordable and manageable, versus a linear one that can become a runaway train of cost very easily, unless you really have it set up and ready to make money. And so we want to try and help people mitigate against that. And by securing sponsorship against it, that is how we do it. And while I can't go into too much detail right now, I will tell you that we have had an agency come along in the last 2 weeks and have asked to take over sponsorship of every single Origin slate, Origin channel partner running slate, bar 3 channels, just like that. And so, this is where the promise is. And I won't go too deep into it, but one of the things that's interesting for brands and agencies is that this isn't an ad. Again, this is just about an interesting way of recapturing imagination from people in places where they don't expect it. And that's what we aim to do. So, leaving a few minutes left for anyone else that may or may not have questions, what I really wanted to do today was make my goal the idea of sparking imagination and giving you some food for thought as to how we want to be looking, or how you want to be looking at anything you're doing in the living room, right? And as you start considering that presence, remembering that it's, I say arguably the most complex and challenging screen in the home, that's bullshit. It's the most challenging and the most expensive screen in the home to get right. I've seen several really good friends who have their channels just go underwater because they've not been able to get that momentum. They've not been able to get to that tipping point of viewership and ad revenue. And again, I'm only talking about the ad-supported folks, which will be a material part of this business for the foreseeable. But but it's the reality. And so our rule is simple. And what I would love to urge anybody to do, and I invite anybody to want to come and have a blue sky conversation with us about other things and thoughts that we have, is don't look at what we've been doing for the last 7 decades. Try to imagine, like, sweep all of that aside and imagine what we could be doing for the next 3 years. And there are no, like, with creativity solved and all of the tech underneath it, there are no rules that can be broken. Just don't, like, if you see it done before, turn and run in the opposite direction. And that's it. Like, I think that's what I really wanted to sort of share, like a slightly fresh approach. And then I will just give Eric, you said I could, this quick shameless plug. We have a whole series of firesides and panels happening over the course of Q1. We were meant to be holding them all in person at CES. And of course, we chose not to go. I myself even had COVID, so that would have really been rude. But we are throwing a series of 30-minute firesides. The first one is actually in about 45 minutes with IPG, and that is actually focused almost exclusively on creative innovation and everything we did, having spent 6 months in their media lab. But that is it. That's all I have for you today. I hope that was remotely helpful somehow.
Yeah, very much so. Thanks, Fred. In fact, I think we could start here and have another hour-long conversation about what you've covered in that second segment, as well as the entire presentation. But I'm definitely going to be checking out your some of your events, and I'm glad to see it looks like you're doing pretty well after surviving the COVIDs.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, like most people, sort of, well, hopefully most people, it sucked and I was pretty unwell, but I definitely feel like I've made it through stronger and more plaiddy than I was before.
Well, you look great. Yeah, you know, it's very kind of thought-provoking what you're bringing up, and I found myself actually a little bit distracted during your presentation. I'm sorry, because I was trying to decide whether the clouds was a bunny or a Thanksgiving turkey or a dragon or something. So it really does work. You know, and it's funny how you can play games with people's. There's something in our chemistry or our biology or the combination of them that we, you know, we get drawn into those types of things, just like you and your Lego Millennium Falcon, and you know, all of a sudden it's like it's a fun little game, and you're right there.
Absolutely, and that's what it's about. You know, it's about precisely that. It's, you know, there's at the very beginning for us, it was a little bit of sort of throw the spaghetti at the wall. And run a lot of brand studies and survey people and find out. And then as we slowly grew in our popularity, it was actually about where can we invest in understanding the neuroscience behind it? You know, what does it really mean? You know, when we say that we don't have someone's attention, and how can that be translated to a lot of the folks who are here, you know, today? Like, how can that knowledge be transferred to solve problems for them? And that was how we came up with Origin Slate.
Yeah, it's simple stuff, really, right? You know, it's surprising, you know, how little it takes to grab somebody's attention, actually, right? I mean, the cloud model, or the you know, find the critter that doesn't match the others. I, you know, had to do it. You know, you just have to. It doesn't have
exactly
to be,
yes.
You know, like a real high resolution piece of content to grab people's attention, and that's just really interesting to think about.
Absolutely.
I mean, people love trivia. Also, we found that out. You know, people would dial into our events just for the trivia.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
That's something that you can do. You know, have an interactive break where there's some trivia questions and things.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I will share this. This is sort of going off topic a little bit for the specific audience we have today, but it might, again, in order to help sort of feed any imagination, you know, like one of the things we do is where we talk about dynamic content. For example, let's say we have a client that is, you know, a tax filing company, or, you know, or somebody like that. Different audiences are different demographics and different geos, and it's one thing trying to resonate with a family on a $27,000 income than it is to resonate with, you know, a single mom on a $2.7 million income, right? Like, they're different people. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about the sights and the sounds that bring their eyes necessarily back up. It's then about what are you going to ask them? And so, like, again, this is our flagship product. It's called Slingshot. And what we do is we create very, very punchy, very short form 15-second short form content that we then stitch and run against a client's ad inside a regular ad break. So their 15 effectively becomes a 30. But what we do is we wrap it in this native content where the messaging itself changes dynamically based upon the person that it's speaking to.
Yeah.
And that is what brings them mentally and emotionally into the TV. And that's where the difference happens.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, and you're right. That's not 70-year thinking, right? That's new thinking. And it's surprising how little of that you actually see manifest now, right? I mean, gosh, the promise of, like 20 years ago, the promise of interactive TV, we're all going to be buying Brad Pitt's suit the minute you see him in a river runs through it or what. No, it doesn't happen. No one does that. Like I don't.
No one will.
Like, let's just be able to effectively leverage what we have.
We do believe, and again, this is really erring more into the philosophical and totally irrelevant today, but we really are very anti the idea of remote control interactivity in an ad. It's not why people are there, right? If you want them to engage or you want interaction, it should be something where you've really given them the desire, but should happen through the second screen or another device they have nearby, right? It's they've got to need to want to. Now, one of the biggest sort of wars waging right now is, how do you do that? Should it be a QR code, for example? And the jury is very much still out on that. Should it be an audio-based activation? That's something that we're exploring now for people who have smart speakers in the same room as their TV. There is a lot of that, but there's a lot more, the problem is a lot more dense than that. But the idea that, and we do, we stand up against a lot of pretty big players here when we say that, pick up your remote and do this. Well, what's in it for me? And that's the real problem. And, and that is something that's not thought about, because too many people in our industry sort of sit in the ivory tower and go, well, I mean, this makes sense. Sure. But are people going to do it?
And just like all software development, what we've learned is you don't really know, right? You know what you think or what works for you, but you're just one user. And so what you really need to do is have a model that's agile, where you can throw a bunch of stuff out there, test it out, and be prepared to just chuck it the very next day and start with something else. And I think that in television, we're still very much in the boxed product mentality, where we're going to build and 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 make this big wonderful program or project or product, and then we're going to ship it, and of course everyone's going to use it, or even watch it. And that's not the way it works, and so I think that mentality that we've learned in tech, it needs to kind of transfer into more of the entertainment side, and
absolutely
behind the entertainment.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to fail, right? You don't learn from getting things right, you learn from getting them wrong. And one of the things that we love doing with some of our clients is we underwrite our R&D. So we want to try this, General Motors. Okay. What are the stats? None. Okay, what's it going to cost you? Nothing. That's, and that's how you really start to turn the pages.
Yeah, and it's, a real encouragement to everybody that's a member of OTT.X, all those that are watching, that try to think of things in that way. That's, I worked at Microsoft when that wasn't the way things were done. Things were very much boxed product. And, there was a time where it was really challenging because companies were coming out like Amazon who didn't do it that way. They just wrote a bunch of code and shipped it at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then by 7 o'clock, it was falling over. And so everybody was working on fixing it and shipping something else. And that's just the way they do things. So, be prepared to fail, expect to fail. It's part of the process, and just have an environment that allows for that, and be able to learn and move forward.
Absolutely.
Certainly very interesting times that we're in, I guess, Fred.
I agree. It's a fun time. It's a fun time for us right now, but it is a dangerous one. I think that's really the point I've wanted to hammer home. It's it is a gold rush, but just, don't go spending all your money buying spades and pickaxes. Be very, very careful.
All of these things are bubbles, I guess, that ultimately can be burst, and many often are. Yeah, it's an interesting way to think of things. When you were talking about looking at things differently, and instead of using the remote, for example, to interact with the TV, it's going to be a second screen. And I was thinking about how we used to all think that when we were going to be able to talk to our TVs and get them to do something, we were just going to have to find a way to build this great microphone that was super responsive and yet like could filter everything else out that was on your TV, build that into your set-top box. And then, we worked so hard on that. Like I was in Intel and we were trying to figure that out. And we got pretty good at it. And then someone came up with the idea of just, well, we'll just put it on the darn remote. and like, oh, yeah, that's really, why didn't we think of that? And it works great. So it's a completely different way of thinking about things. And, it's amazing the amount of resources that have been poured into other approaches for all this stuff. And, I think that the same thing for interactivity is really beckoning for all of us that are in this space. All right, cool. As always, Fred, really great seeing you and so nice talking. Looking forward to hanging out in person sometime soon. I'm glad you're doing well. It's fairly COVID-y out there, so everyone take care of yourselves and stay as vaccinated as you can, I guess. All right. So with that, I'm going to close things up. Thanks again, Fred, Godfrey, and Origin for that intriguing and thought-provoking discussion. And thanks to all of you for attending this here edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. As always, session was recorded and it's going to be available on the OTT.X website at OTT.X.org, along with a whole bunch of other valuable videos and presentations from across all of our online events over the last year plus. Hope you'll all join us on January 26th in a couple of weeks when Colin Dixon, founder and chief analyst of Endscreen Media, and Steve Harnsberger, founder and CEO of Universal Search and Discovery, take a deep dive into the seemingly distant dream of a truly universal search in their presentation. Also, we've recently released this year's slate of events and activities, and you can check them all out on our website at OTT.X.org. We do want to remind everybody that our flagship online event, OTT.X Online Live, is taking place next month on February 23rd. It's our first conference of the year, and we have a truly stacked slate of presenters and panelists who are thrilled to present from the comfort of their own homes. We'll also be getting together following day in person on February 24th when OTT.X once again returns with the roundtable discussion sessions to Los Angeles. It's a great way to connect with colleagues across the ecosystem and share ideas about the business of over-the-top video. That's on February 24th in a yet-to-be-disclosed location in Los Angeles. You can find out more about all these events and programs at the OTT.X website, OTT.X.org. I'm going to drop the link in for information about all our upcoming events into the chat window, so you can jump over there and register right now. So with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And thanks again, Fred and Origin. It's great having you here. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.